I'm Gloria Barron with the Office of ELITE, which stands for E-Learning Innovation and Teaching Excellence. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Professor Karina Rock. I am in the ELAP program, the English language for academic purposes for second language speakers. I teach the reading classes, the speaking classes, the speaking and listening classes, I should say, the writing classes, and the integrated skills classes. So pretty much everything in our program I've taught, and I've used Hypothesis in all the classes that I teach for different articles that I assign through Blackboard.
Hey everybody, my name is Matthew Decker. I'm an English professor and I generally teach composition, research, and literature courses. And when I use Hypothesis, it's often in our Introduction to College Writing class and GL 101.
Hi, I'm Chip Gladson. I teach English on the Germantown campus, and I use Hypothesis in all of my classes, composition and literature. And in particular, all of my classes are OER or Z degree courses. And I find that Hypothesis is a nice anchor for those OER resources.
I'm Sharon Anthony. I'm a professor in the English and Reading department here at Germantown. I'm also the department chair. And I use Hypothesis primarily in my English 101 classes, but also in 102. And I've used it in my literature classes as well. And I have learned so much from Chip and from others like Karina and Matt have said. I just found it a really useful tool in getting students to interact with the text and to find their own voices.
I'm Karen Penday Martinez. I don't teach English, I teach computer applications. And I have been using Hypothesis in my Intro to Computer Applications class to have students actually read the notes that I share. Ours is also a Z course with open materials that I've provided. And this way they actually read them.
For those of you who aren't familiar, Hypothesis is a social annotation tool. Basically, it takes our text and adds a collaborative sidebar. And that's what this Hypothesis social annotation tool is referring to, collaborative and interactive approach to reading with reading and engaging with digital texts. So for our panelists today, can you give us an overview of how your experience with Hypothesis for social annotation has gone for you? Just like in general, if you have any instances where you feel like it has really improved your educational experiences. And Chip, why don't we start with you for now?
Okay, yeah, as I mentioned, I use OER, that's Open Educational Resources, and I use Hypothesis, chiefly to get those resources to the students. It's a place for me to put them into our Blackboard course site. And once it's there, I encourage students then to add annotations, and I give them specific instructions on what I'd like them to address in their annotations. So as you'll learn in this workshop, in this roundtable, I ask them to highlight a part of text and then to tell us, in answer to specific questions, how they interpret or what they infer from the text that they have highlighted. Then they have a conversation within the text on those highlighted sections, those annotations. And I have examples. I don't know at what point you want to look at examples, but I can do that as well.
Here's my course website. And so, for example, I have, a set of software programs that students are working with. And for each software program, the first thing in there is read and annotate the notes. And I used to give out these notes in the past, and I don't think anybody ever read them because it wasn't required. And so now I have the notes. And so, these are my notes here. And then over on the right-hand side, here are, I require them to do just one annotation, but, for example, so here's an annotation from a student. I can reply if they had a question. Here's a student who shared some keyboard shortcuts that I didn't put in my notes, but he suggested some other ones. Here's a student who responded to him. So it just allows me to make sure that actually people are reading the notes and getting that information, and then they're sharing tips with each other or suggestions about, oh, well, I use a Mac, it works differently here. So that's been great.
Nice. Do you think, Karen, that using Hypothesis has enhanced the educational experience for your students?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I post videos and I post notes. I know that in the past, I would ask students and they would say, yeah, I watched the video, but nobody ever said, yeah, I read the notes. And so now they do, and they find things that are useful to them there.
Right.
And, that's been a real boon.
Very nice. Thank you so much, Karen. Matthew, what about you? What do you think?
I was just thinking about adding a quick thought. So I tend to assign Hypothesis almost immediately, like maybe week 1 or week 2, as a way to encourage active reading strategies. And in the past, what I would do is I'd be like, here's what active reading looks like. And you highlight and you annotate in the margins and you circle words you don't know, you look up. And I feel like that can sort of fall on not very interested ears. So what I found is that Hypothesis is a more active way for them to sort of teach each other. So they sort of lead in the learning in that way. And then especially like one of our first assignments is focused on audience, and I might talk about this a little bit later. But what I found is I assign Hypothesis in class often. And so it's a way that I can guarantee they're going to do the reading. They'll get awarded for doing that reading because it's an easy 10 points that they can earn. But the ultimate conversation, because we'll take their reading and turn it into a class discussion, is much more active and robust because every one of us has been present and active in the process of doing it. So I found that has made the overall classroom learning experience really, really great.
So we got an overview from some folks, and I really liked that Karen brought in the idea of annotating course documents outside of just readings. So having students annotate things like notes or a syllabus or something can be super helpful outside of just course text as well. So there's a bunch of different ways that you can engage students with Hypothesis. We heard from you about how they've kind of engaged with the course materials more, but how have you seen Hypothesis increase engagement of students with one another? Has that helped create more active discussion and meaningful interaction in your courses? And Sharon, I think Gloria mentioned we can start with you this time.
Okay, so I have found in the past, although Matt said it beautifully, I love Hypothesis because it can get students in the habit of actively reading texts. And now you say there's a tool for YouTube videos, which is amazing. So I think that's the next step. But I can tell you that I have often found that students don't read the material, as Karen was saying. So this is a great way to make it a collaborative, engaging activity in the class. Instead of having me and one student talk about the reading, instead, everyone is participating and writing. And what I love really the most about this socially is that they see other students reflecting on the writing, making observations, making critical comments, seeing how they can use the material. And that sets the bar really high. And so then they start emulating that behavior. They start feeding off of one another's comments. And I find that to be really, really successful. However, I have learned I have to kind of keep it simple and open. If I make it too specific, then that kind of narrows them down. What they say. So I want them to kind of feed off of one another and learn that. And they really do. I even start the semester with, there's an essay about first drafts. And it's basically about this idea that, the first draft you write down is not the perfect draft. And, you have to kind of let yourself grow through writing. And I have them read that, which they don't, for homework. And when we come in, they start annotating that and talking to each other. I have them in groups discuss it and make annotations. First, I let them do it on their own for a couple of minutes. Then they share it in groups. And then we share it on the big screen for the whole class to see and to comment. And I found that gives them time to think for themselves and then to feel comfortable sharing it with someone else and then talking as a whole group. And it really does open up a very rich, robust discussion. And I do this later when they're reviewing sources for research papers and that sort of thing. I give them time to read and to share their thoughts, and then we discuss it as a class. And I found it to be incredibly helpful because that social confidence they develop translates into better learning and eventually better writing for me. And I do it when I'm introducing a new topic. I give them a reading and I have them sort of deconstruct it for the techniques that are being used, and then they just learn so much more, and then they're equipped to talk about it a little bit. So that's how I use it, and I do make it an engaging activity. If I have a really long reading, I break it up into sections, and I have different groups each annotate different sections and then talk about it when we come back as a whole group. So yeah, again, I make it very simple. It's a very in-class collaborative thing, hopefully feeding off of what they've already read for homework. So I hope that answers the question.
Oh, that's so powerful. Absolutely. And Karina, how would you answer this question?
So one of the things that we haven't talked about yet, but I have found that I love to see is the students kind of making connections and posting links and posting videos and posting pictures. Some of the things that the students have done in my class is they'll take like an infographic that they found that explains a concept, and they'll put that infographic right in there for the other students to see. So it doesn't have to just be text. Some of the most successful uses of hypothesis for me have been in my listening speaking class, where they're reading a supplemental reading based on a lecture video that they've watched in TED Talks or things like that. And then they go find something that's related in a video form or an infographic form and then share that. Sharon just mentioned how they model for each other. And that's what I see too. In the beginning, many of them will just like highlight a vocabulary word that they don't understand, which is fine. It's good. You know, they're sharing what they need to know, and vocabulary development is one of the pieces of my class. But as they get more experience with other students kind of posting and sharing, they improve the types of annotation that they're doing. And so I think this is what Sharon was mentioning too. It's an accountability. You know, it shows that they read it. They go through and they have to find, usually I assign about 3 annotations or 5 annotations, depending on the class and the assignment, but for each of them. I haven't used it as much in separate groups. I know you can, but this is kind of a way to use a reading that I might have assigned in a traditional face-to-face class as a small group reading, but I can assign it in Blackboard here together and ask them to collaborate on it that way. So
Very nice. Thank you so much, Karina.
absolutely.
Anyone else would like to add to this discussion? Topic 2? Everything that had to be said was said. Okay, let's go talk about the most exciting part of this discussion, the pedagogical approaches. So take it from here, Christy.
Yeah, so that is perfect timing, because I put an example of assignment instructions in the chat. So we have some sample assignment instructions that you could provide your students. I do think that providing guidance for students in their annotations can be really important in ensuring that you have a meaningful conversation. So I'd love to hear more about your strategies for creating your assignment instructions. Like, how do you structure your assignments, and how do you ensure that, you know, all the voices are being heard in the annotations? So I think we heard from Karina, Matthew, and Sharon before. So Karen or Chip, do you want to take a stab at this one?
I start early in the semester. Here's the first week of an English 101 class. And in this case, I'm teaching students about rhetorical context, about purpose, author, and audience. And to do that, I introduce them to these concepts. And I also then give them an example. In this case, I use Amanda Gorman's The Hill We Climb. And I talk then about purpose. I have them watch a video of her reading her poem or reciting her poem at the inauguration, if you remember that. And I go through, and in this assignment, I asked them to identify specific instances of purpose, audience, and author in the text. So I have this in one page in Blackboard. It's an item in Blackboard. And then in the next page, the students will then launch the hypothesis assignment itself. So I break it down in that way. And in this case, I have the instructions for what the students should annotate in the two places. So again, here is, and by the way, in this case, it's a URL that I'm using as opposed to a PDF. Usually it's PDFs, but in this case, I wanted to use the URL because I also have the video they can watch. And then I've asked them to identify, as I said, examples of author, purpose, and audience. I also asked them to tag their responses. So they're going to identify 3 parts of the text, 3 parts of the poem, and tag them as well. So as you can see here, I'm asking them to look at this, and one student can then talk about, let's see, author. Let's see if I can make this happen. Here we go. So this student has identified part of the text, highlighted the text, and then the student has written something about that piece of text to explain how this helps us to understand the author of the text. And then the student also tags it as author. So other students will come along, say, okay, I see that. And then another student might then come down and look for something like purpose, and then tag that as well. So they highlight a piece of text, we, the successors of a country and a time, and then explain how this helps them to understand the purpose of the text. And they tag purpose here as well. In addition to that, I ask students to reply to one another. So for example, you can see how one student has replied to another. This is less specific instructions. I want to keep it open, so somebody can just say, I agreed. And then sometimes they can add to, or perhaps also correct or what another student has said, rare, but it happens. So this is an example of specific instructions for an assignment that happens at the beginning of the semester, and for which I've asked students to tag their responses, and it's also graded. So I can come back later, I can look at all the students who have participated, and I can even look for each student by student, and this is the way that I grade this assignment.
How easy is it for you to grade those assignments?
It's the easiest grading that you could possibly do, right?
Yeah, can you show us the, like, where do you grade? I didn't see anything about
Yeah, let me try to
grades.
bring
Could
that
somebody
up.
please show us how to activate hypothesis?
That's
All right,
yeah.
okay, hold on for a second if you don't mind, Chip. I just want to clarify that for Linda. You don't activate hypothesis, it's already activated for us here at the college. So it's already available for you through Blackboard, and you can create your hypothesis assignments from Blackboard. And I can show you that after this session, or you can attend our 5 p.m. session, but it's really easy. Okay, go on. I'm sorry, Chip.
That's okay. So I think in this case, I've already graded this assignment. Let me see if I can bring it up in a way that you can see it. No. So I can look at the annotations here. What happens is, I wish I had one that's live now, not from a previous course. I don't though.
I think I can show mine.
Yeah, go ahead, please. Please.
I graded them, but I think they're still showing. This is a current course. Okay, so like, here's my instructions. It's just basically 2 lines here. You know, read the notes, drag your mouse over a point you want to annotate, add a substantive annotation, question, a comment, etc. And so then when I click on the assignment, now that people have, you know, completed it, so I can see here all students, I can drop down, I can pick a particular student, his annotation is here. And if that's acceptable, I give him up here the grade 10 out of 10. So
And so here's another follow-up question to that, Karen.
Mhm.
You're adding a 10 as a top score. What if a person is grading on a percentage basis?
So I put him a score 1 to 10, but everything actually shows up in my grade book as a percentage. I do everything on a percentage basis.
And it does the
So-
conversion automatically, correct?
Yeah, it happened automatically. Yeah, so 10 out of 10 is 100%. And basically, you know, I'm not sort of grading the quality. You know, if they only said something like yes, then I might have given them fewer points. But pretty much everybody who puts something substantive, and so they get 10 out of 10.
Okay.
So Linda, did that show you what you wanted to see?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
And I just want to also follow up again with those instructions. The instructions are so important because with good instructions, students will be able to follow through the way that you want them to, so that you get better, higher quality responses and original posts. So again, the instructions, make sure you think those through if you are going to plan this in the near future to get the best out of this exercise. All right, anyone else would like to take a stab at this one? Let me go back to the PowerPoint so you can see.
I think Comfort has a question.
Yes, Comfort.
Yeah, it's just a question of clarification. So from my understanding is that the professor has to create the assignment and assign the grades, right? Okay.
Yes, and it doesn't have to be a graded assignment. It's only if you set it up as such. So if you set it up as a graded assignment, you will get the text box at the top for you to enter that value. Otherwise, you don't have to worry about that. It's more just an activity for students.
Okay, so it can be formative or just interactive activity. Thank you.
Anything else we should add, Christy?
I don't think so from here. I did put a link to a resource document in the chat that has some links to example assignment instructions, and also a link to how to get started with Hypothesis in Blackboard if folks are not able to attend the 5 p.m. session today.
Thank you. Thank you for that. All right, Karina, I want to hear from you. This is an important topic, and I know you have a lot of good strategies. Karina with us?
I always forget when I'm muted. So sometimes I'm very prescriptive and I say exactly like what I'm expecting. But one of the things that I would say is in the ELAP program, especially in the reading courses, we teach annotation. So we teach them to comment, and we have different types of annotation that we expect. So you know, sometimes I'm just asking for them to highlight vocabulary that was particularly challenging for them, or I may ask them to highlight and respond with a link or a connection or an image or things like that. I find though that when I leave it fairly open-ended, some of the students come up with some really creative things to share. As I mentioned, I have students that have shared infographics and videos and things like that. And I just love it when they get in there and kind of use their creativity. I try to show them the possibilities of how they can do this. They can add images, they can add things that are maybe not expected, just the text or things like that. But that's, I find that giving them that option to kind of look at the different tools within Hypothesis that they can use has been really helpful. And as I say, again, our students are taught to annotate, but I feel like their annotations are better when they know that other students are going to see them, right? So we teach them to take notes on a reading and to have reactions to the reading and to make connections to the reading. but the students here have kind of done a little bit more with it. They as I say, they find a video or things like that. Honestly, I'm sorry, Karen, I didn't pull up I did pull it up last night to see like if I could find that infographic one, because it was one of my favorites. But there's like, for instance, there's like a little robot video that my students found about how robots were responding during COVID. But I didn't pull it up, so I don't have it ready. I might be able to
a little later, like if you pull it up and just let us know, and then I'll let you go back and share with us.
Great.
Sounds good? Okay, so here's I wonder about this. I know that our A students are always going to do good work, right? What is Hypothesis actually doing for our struggling students, those that don't tend to engage as well, or that may fall behind a little too fast? Does this help them, and how? Who'd like to tackle that one? How about Matthew? We haven't heard from you.
Sure, I was just thinking about this one. So I'm going to go back to my earlier phrase of how it allows our students to lead the learning. I feel like, especially in certain contexts, like this summer when I was teaching remote, I was very much a talking head because everyone else is a black box. But I found that Hypothesis was really cool for my students who are maybe a bit stronger in the material to take on a more pseudo teaching assistant role in support of their classmates, and sort of to model stronger approaches to participating in the hypothesis driven conversation. And then ultimately that can be empowering, right? To witness that, oh, my classmate can do this. Well, here's how I can participate as well. And so I think maybe I'll stop there. I imagine there's another way that we can look at this, but I think it's a way to model the work for their peers who are struggling, and then also to empower them.
Yes, I love that. Sharon, what about you? What do you think? You have so much experience with this.
Well, just to add to that, I find that the first time, or actually throughout, but mostly the first time I use it, I have them make connections to their lives. And so everyone can say something about it. If we're reading about, people who are afraid of being judged for their writing, or people who just can't get started writing, everyone can kind of relate to that. And so I have them, make comments about how does this kind of reflect or compare to your experiences and that sort of thing like that, so that they all have something to say. And that gets them using the tool and engaging in a conversation, even with students who may not enjoy the subject matter of the course. They all have something to say, whether it's positive or negative. I love the idea of letting them pull in graphics, because many of them would really enjoy that, I think, to sort of supplement what they're saying. But that's really how I do it. And also, this is going to sound really bad, but it gets them to read. And they have to read to make the annotations. And even if they only read a small piece of it, they're still building some critical thinking skills. And that helps all of the students, and particularly the ones who don't feel very powerful in a classroom. They have to do it. They have to read. They get better. And then they see that. And it's just like having them talk about what they've written and what they've annotated. It gives them confidence that they belong.
Mm-hmm. Big one. They want to feel like they belong. That's wonderful. Let's see. Anyone else would like to comment on this topic? Share something that has not been shared already.
One thing that I use Hypothesis for as well is, we're talking about reading, of course, and it's central to reading instruction. But in many of our classes, we're also teaching writing and using outside or other voices, using text in their writing. So if you ever ask your students to use quotes or paraphrases in a writing assignment, this is also a good tool for getting them there. I can share an example. So in also my English 101 class, I have them read in another section. They're preparing to write an essay, and they're using outside sources. So this is an example of an OER that I use, How I Celebrate Life on the Day of the Dead. And a student will highlight text which they want to say something about. In this case, they're talking about trying to identify theme or message in this text. And the student then has something to say about the text that they have highlighted. And this step right here is that preliminary step toward using this quote in the essay, which they're going to write next. So in a sense, they've already done that step. They're going to use a part of the text in the essay that they're writing next, and they've already gotten started on what they're going to say about it. So we're trying to get students not only to drop in quotes, in an essay, drop and run, but rather to say something about the quote which they have used in their essay. And in this case, the students already have done that. So they can come back to the hypothesis assignment, see what they highlighted, what they annotated, and think about how they can use and improve upon what they've said here when they go to write the essay itself.
All right, nice, thank you. All right, so our next topic of discussion is student motivation and engagement, which is always really the bottom line for using hypothesis. That is what we're always trying to do, connect with them. So Christy, you want to take it from here?
Sure. I'm actually interested in with regards to this question and student attitudes toward reading and engagement. Have you all had feedback from students about how hypothesis has improved their learning, or have you had observations about how it's changed their approach to the reading material? I'm trying to think. I'm not sure who might have not spoken in a bit. If anyone wants to just pop in as a volunteer.
Christy, I'd like to say just one thing real quick. What I have found is that, and this is the most beneficial piece from my point of view, from the critical thinking perspective, is that they see these texts not as something that they have to read as part of a course that's unrelated to life, but instead they see it as a discussion. So they start to see idea exchange, information exchange as discussion, and they are jumping into it. So that's the really great thing I think about it, because not only are they learning to annotate, but the act of annotation is them thinking about what they're reading or seeing in videos and making them reflect on it, and not always critique it necessarily, but say something about it, assess its validity. How does it connect with their lives? How can they use that information? How can they solve that problem? How can that be useful to people? So that's the biggest thing. But on the flip side, if I don't have them do something accountable with it, then they still don't read. So again, I need to assign this or do it in class so that they read. So that's sort of like the stick. And the carrot is they learn to take part in scholarly conversations and just conversations in life.
I love that. My students have said in their course evaluations they actually appreciate the accountability that hypothesis provides. Karen, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, thanks. I actually have a question about this because in the past, I prepared the notes in Microsoft Word, and I demonstrated for students, because I have some students who they have reading disabilities, or many students who just don't like to read, don't read well. I've heard them try to read my notes, and they aren't reading with clear understanding and comprehension. So I actually showed them how in Microsoft Word, you can get the program to read aloud to you. And I'm wondering, is there such a capacity either here or, through the PDF or something to have it read aloud to them?
Hypothesis does work with screen readers. So I'll put a link in the chat. I have to dig it up, but we have some information about how it works with different screen readers. So a student might have to use something that's, I think like Macs have something built in, but depending on their computer, they might need software for that. But I'll put some info in the chat on that. So any other thoughts, Chip or Matthew or Karina, on the student attitudes towards reading?
I think it's been said before, but I think that when they see the other students interacting with the reading, if they are kind of maybe reluctant participants in the reading, they start to see that modeled behavior. If I assign, read this and annotate it, I'll get annotations. But when they know that somebody else is going to have to read them and respond to them, they think about it a little bit more. And as I say, in the beginning, oftentimes the annotations are not as good, but then they see, oh, the professor showed off like some of her favorites of this group that did it before, and showed like the ones that really made an impact for the class. And okay, next time I'm going to try that. So as I say, I like to see how, because it's collaborative, they can kind of feed off each other in that way.
Very nice. Okay. Anyone else? Any questions from the audience? Everybody's good? Okay. Thank you. Okay, let's go to our last topic. Addressing challenges and concerns. Christy?
Thanks, Gloria. So I see the mention of AI in this topic, and AI has been kind of a hot topic lately. Students having these tools where they could perhaps, turn to AI to help them write text, or easily summarize text. How do you all see Hypothesis helping students either reduce the reliance on AI or helping them better learn about like strengths and weaknesses of AI? Have you thought about how you will approach this in your classes?
And I know, Chip, you and I discussed this topic together. So I know that you have some great strategies. Could you share that with us?
Sure. So generative AI, chatbots, everybody knows about them now. There's an interesting piece in the Shift in the New York Times today about how you can think about AI this semester, because one of the points in here is that it's safe to assume that all students will use chatbots now this semester. So it's not just for some students. So how can Hypothesis have a role in this discussion? One thing is that if you're asking students to do that active and collaborative, as Karina said, work toward, for example, a written assignment, you know that they've already begun. They have some of the goods in an early stage in the writing process, right? So we know that they've started something. It's not the sort of thing where they're going to come to the 11th hour and type a prompt into ChatGPT and produce that essay out of thin air. So we know that at least they've done something toward it already. And this goes towards one suggestion we make in our writing disciplines working paper on how to respond to AI in academic writing. And that is that it's the chain of custody is the term I'm using. And that is, if in the final draft of an essay, we can identify links in the chain from earlier parts of the writing process, then we know that the student had at least some work coming into it, right? And Hypothesis allows us then to see that. We say, oh, you were working on this idea that ended up in the final draft of your essay in that early reading stage and annotation stage. And there's two sides to this. One is, yes, you can verify it. The instructor can come in, go back and say, oh, there's the quote that you used in your essay, and there's your first shot at it when you were using the annotation and hypothesis, number one. Number two, this is how instructors think, right? Just by the fact that you're asking students to do this, and you have a discussion about AI, about the appropriateness of when we might use AI, students will know, oh, this is out there, and they're less likely to rely upon ChatGPT exclusively to, produce that essay for them when the assignment is due. So in this sense, Hypothesis is an excellent tool to, one, prevent over-reliance on AI. I'm not saying that we should ban AI entirely. There are appropriate uses of it. However, it is a good opportunity to have students do that kind of work, which we want students to do. Those are the things that we want the students to do, and not rely exclusively on AI to produce or generate something down the line. So I like Hypothesis really for this particular reason. It's really good for this job. It's we don't have a lot of answers, right? That's one of the challenges. Like go around, the college and do these little talks about generative AI. We don't have these perfect, okay, this is it. This is going to take care of it. You don't have to worry about it anymore. But I think Hypothesis, among all of the different potential, strategies we can use, it's one of the best.
Thank you. Matthew, what do you think?
I'm going to go back to something I mentioned earlier. We need our students to see themselves in an academic space and feel confident there, and to recognize that they can be makers of meaning. This is a conversation we've been having recently about just how we navigate the world. All of us in this room, likely today, will come across information in the world and not exactly challenge it, but critique it and be interested in it and reflect on it. And that's not always the approach that our younger students may have, students going right out of high school may have. And so they don't always see themselves in that space, and they're certainly not confident there. So I like Hypothesis as a space for them to practice making meaning. They can do this collaboratively. They can do it in a safe space. They can do it in a space that I don't think is very intimidating. And I also don't think, I really appreciate Chip reminding me that more and more of our students are going to be turning to AI. But when I'm in Hypothesis, I honestly don't see it as this scary space. And I wouldn't think, my students are going to immediately think, I'm going to try to do something with AI here. No, they're just going to stay. They're going to stay in this Hypothesis space and navigate the material together, and ideally make meaning together in a way that I think is valuable. So hopefully it can just be one more in-class or out-of-class experience that they are in charge of, and they start to recognize the power of their own voices and their own sense of style, their own approach.
I just want to say the word confidence was also something that when I looked at this section of the questions that you gave us to review before the panel today, that was what stood out to me here as well. If we can grow their confidence, they're not going to have to reach as much for those tools of AI, because if they feel like they have language, if they feel like they have empowerment to speak with their own voice, then they don't have to use an AI voice to do that. And I do believe that as they grow in their ability to read and annotate and understand the reading, they feel more like they have an investment in their own voice, kind of giving words to things. So I think that again, that word confidence was a big part of my answer to this question as well.
Beautiful. Karen?
Well, yeah, I'm just, in years past, I had students doing research papers, and I frequently got, this was even before AI, but just stuff they had copied off the web, because they were so overwhelmed by the idea of writing a research paper. And some of them, when I talked to them about it, I said, but this person said it so much better than I ever could. So this kind of stepwise, like Chip is talking about, working them into, you already said something about this, now you're going to write it up in a more formal way. It seems much less intimidating, I think, to them.
True. Yes. Sharon?
I agree with what everyone has said, and especially scaffolding the assignment, building it into chunks so that they're not doing it all like the day before and then feeling this need to turn to AI. But the other thing I'm going to do this semester, and I'm interested to see if it works, is I would like to have AI generate a short paper on the topic and then post it in Hypothesis and have us critique it and say, where are the really good things and where is this limited? Are the sources relevant? Are they recent? Are they actually real? Does this make sense? Does it say anything? Does it have a voice? Is its voice better than yours? And some of them will think it is, but I think it's really interesting to have them look at it and then say, okay, what kind of grade would this get? And I think showing them that they have a stronger voice sometimes than something that's perfectly generated by a computer with perfect grammar and sentences. So we're going to be talking about AI in my class this semester, and I'm hoping to pull in those samples. And I think Hypothesis might open up a door for having some reflection on it. Now, again, I do have students sometimes who are not very strong writers, and for them, it may sound much, much better than anything they could come up with. But to show them the limitations of it and what they risk in turning to that source. But there are ways they could use AI to help them. And so I think, you know, it is ethically use it. So I think that warrants a discussion. But let's face it, even as a college, we're trying to figure out how we approach this. So we don't have all the answers. And I think, you know, we have to be honest with students as we go along and tell them why we don't want them using it. It's not because we just want to make their life miserable, but what they're going to actually gain out of thinking for themselves. And so I think that's kind of what I would use it for.
Thank you for being here today, and you guys have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much, everybody. Gloria, thank you for inviting us. It was nice.
You're welcome.
Take care.
Thank you.
This is helpful.
Thank you.